breaker will not hold three 1,000 watt bulbs.
That's his baby.
These two were on and then they were off, and Cody couldn't.
The 9th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.
Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this edition of Consider This. I'm Andrea McMaster. Well, chances are you've heard of ACLU Nebraska, but do you know what the group does or what it stands for? The Nebraska Civil Liberties Union was founded in 1966 as a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization devoted to the defense and promotion of individual rights. And it's been led for the past 6 years by Tim Butts. Now the former executive director recently resigned and is with us today to tell us about the past 6 years and some of the cases he worked on. And also we're joined today by Joseph Brown, who is a board member with the ACLU and can tell us a little bit about how individuals in the community can get involved with ACLU Nebraska. And thank you both for being with us today.
Our pleasure. Too.
I'm glad to have you. Well, Tim, you said the past 6 years were the busiest years of your life. You spent many hours on the road, 180,000 miles on your car, many.
Oh, that's just commuting. That doesn't
That's just
count,
commuting, okay.
count the road work.
Okay. And many weekends as well. So,
Yeah.
but it was worth it.
Oh, it was definitely worth it. There comes a point in everyone's life when you have to say, you know, is this what I want to continue doing for the rest of my life? And I decided I didn't want to continue to commute for the rest of my life. But the 6 years that I was there were 6 good years for me professionally. We were able to increase the membership of the Nebraska ACLU from 750 to over 1,500, so it more than doubled while I was there. We took on some controversial cases that are having a national impact, and I think they were 6 years well spent.
Well, your colleagues would say that you were remarkably successful at what you did in the past 6 years. What would you say?
Well, you know, I think there was a good deal of success. Like I said, the membership doubled, and you don't double the membership of an organization like the ACLU unless you're doing things that people want to see done. For as much controversy as there was over some of our cases, those cases clearly struck a bell with people and brought them into our membership. The ACLU stands up for the rights of individuals, and we don't always pick our client. Usually the government picks our client. The government doesn't pick on people that have popular ideas. The government doesn't pick on people that enjoy mass support. They pick on people who are perhaps a little on the fringe of society in some way, or whose ideas are not accepted as mainstream. And it's up to groups like the ACLU to draw a line in the sand and say, hold it. An injury to one is an injury to all. When you deny the rights of Nazis to march in the streets, when you deny the rights of anyone to exercise free speech, you abridge the right of everyone.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the cases, the high-profile one especially, the lawsuit challenging the city of Plattsmouth over its 10 Commandments monument in the city park. And the ACLU claimed that the marker violated separation of church and state. A federal appeals court ruled last year that the marker could stay, however. So, well, first off, were you surprised by this ruling?
Since I'm not with the ACLU anymore and can express a personal opinion, it's my opinion that there isn't a civil liberty that the Eighth Circuit wouldn't like to violate. The Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals has resorted or used convoluted logic they've created a legal myth to justify the continued presence of that monument in the park. There were 2 cases involving Ten Commandment monuments that were decided by the U.S. Supreme Court a few months prior to the Eighth Circuit releasing their opinion on the Plattsmouth case. And those opinions could be read in different ways, and the court chose a way that allowed the monument to be that allowed the monument to continue in place. It was clear from the argument that preceded the decision that the judges had made up their mind ahead of time that they didn't like this lawsuit, and I think it was no surprise at all that the court ruled the way they did. They picked a bit of contorted logic to justify what they did, and we were stuck with the results.
Joseph, you were nodding your head, so I didn't know if you had.
Well, I will be a bit more tactful than Tim, but it was a bit surprising in that the Supreme Court had, even though they'd ruled that one monument could stay and one monument couldn't, I thought they'd laid out a really rational basis for why a monument might be appropriate based on lots of other historical artifacts, a large display, a context in which was clearly not about religion, but a larger context was permissible, but a standalone monument of that sort would not be permissible. The Supreme Court, I thought, had made a very rational distinction, and I was very surprised to see what looked like a very rational Supreme Court decision applied, it seemed almost exactly backwards by the Eighth Circuit. It was a surprise to me, though, a big disappointment.
Well, I was there that day in the city of Plattsmouth after they received the ruling, and they were calling this a victory. I mean, they were very excited.
They had a victory.
Well,
Right,
it was a win for them,
it was a victory for them.
And I think that's one of the striking things about working for the ACLU is often you find yourself, the majority is happy when you lose, because as Tim was saying, the whole nature of our government is that a democracy through the voting process protects the majority. Through the Constitution, it protects the minority. And so as defenders of the Constitution, we're almost without exception going to be the unpopular cause. And that was certainly the case in Plattsmouth. The majority of people like a Ten Commandments monument in their park in Plattsmouth.
Well, do you think it had to do, many people don't know what this park actually looks like. It's not necessarily on the beaten path. It's in a more of a secluded area. There's lots of large trees around. It's kind of in the corner. Unless you were really looking for it, would you really know that the Ten Commandments
there's a
monument
major
was there?
road that goes right by the monument. You see it from the road going on the edge of the park there. But there was a bigger issue than whether it was in a prominent place or in the back of the park. And that issue was whether the government can be your minister. Does the government have the right to tell you what to believe in when it comes to matters of theology? Now, as the judge's decision at the district court level, when the federal courts ruled for us in the first trial, the judge's opinion was very clear that this was a religious monument, and the city could not get around that. The Eighth Circuit stood that on its head and said, well, yeah, it says, you know, things about God, but we're just going to forget that it says things about God, and we're going to allow it to stand anyway. There's no rhyme or reason for the government to tell people that if they want to be a member of that community, if they want to be a fully accepted citizen in Plattsmouth, they have to believe in God. That runs contrary to any concept of religious or intellectual freedom.
And that's a little bit about the background of this case too. It was an individual
Right.
who didn't appreciate seeing it when he was out for a run or walking past the park. So tell us now, where do you go from here? Is there anything you can do about this ruling?
No. The long and the short of it is, because the Supreme Court had ruled on 2 similar cases within the year, every expert that we consulted on how the Supreme Court operates told us that we were wasting our time, energy, and money by appealing it, that they would not even hear the case.
But this is another case that you mentioned. It did receive national attention.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
And the other case that's receiving a lot of national attention is I think, equally controversial, and that's the ACLU's challenge to Initiative 416.
Which is the same-sex marriage.
Right,
Or
the
amendment,
same-sex-
the constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage.
No, well, that's the easy way of looking at it,
Okay.
Andrea. What it really did was it banned government recognition of any form of same-sex union. It just didn't ban marriage. If it had simply defined marriage as being between a man and a woman, I don't know that we would have even taken the case on, because there's a lot of precedent that would have said the government can do that. But what the government did with Initiative 416, what 70% of the people of Nebraska did in passing it, was say that the government couldn't recognize civil unions, domestic partnerships, or any other form of same-sex union. And by doing that, they in effect barred the legislative doors to gays, lesbians, their families, and their friends. It told this entire community of people that they could not go to the legislature and seek any kind of change in the law that would protect them and their families in the area of civil law.
Well, let's talk a little bit about where it sits right now, the amendment sits. Okay, a federal court ruled against the amendment, and now that
Right.
case is on appeal.
Correct, and there's been an oral argument that's been conducted in front of the Eighth Circuit, and we're now awaiting a decision. And as I said earlier, you know, I don't have a lot of faith in the Eighth Circuit right now, but nobody can predict what'll happen.
But Nebraska is not the only state dealing with this issue. So do you seek guidance from other states? Do you join together and enforce? You might say, I don't know. What do you do when you're looking to take a case on like this?
Well, this was the biggest case that the ACLU's ever undertaken in Nebraska. And in fact, we did reach out and created a partnership with another organization, Lambda Legal Defense Fund, to help us in the work. Our legal team has consisted of 7 attorneys from 3 different cities. It's been the biggest case in terms of resource investment, time, attention, and we won at the district court level. And we'll have to wait and see what comes out of the appeals court. In drafting the complaint against Initiative 416, we argued First Amendment rights, that in effect the amendment prohibited people or made it impossible for people to exercise their First Amendment rights to seek a redress of their grievances from the government. And we also argued that it was a bill of attainder. And everybody, when I tell them bill of attainder, they kind of scratch their head, and they have to remember back to 6th grade civics classes.
Which I don't remember.
A bill of attainder came out of the experience of the English people, where the crown would punish entire families for the actions of one member. If someone committed treason to the crown, it wasn't just that person that was punished, but the entire family would be punished. They'd lose their property, they'd lose their estate, imprisonment, whatever. And the framers of our Constitution decided that we weren't going to have that guilt by association, that we would punish people for what they did and not for who they are. So we argued that Initiative 416 punished people for who they were and not for anything that they had done. And the court found that it was a bill of attainder, that it operated to punish people because of their status in society and not because of their actions.
And what's more, not much like the Bill of Attainder punishes their families as well. I mean,
Right.
Children of a gay couple are denied the normal rights that a child has to have 2 parents who are legally entitled to raise them, the protection under cases of divorce. I mean, all the sorts of things that we put together as a society to protect children. And because of the fundamental nature, I would argue, but because of some characteristic of the parents, these children are being punished. That doesn't strike me as a fair way to do business, nor a legal one.
This issue, I mean, you're very passionate about it, and you put so
Yes.
much work into this.
Yeah.
Even though you're not the executive director of the ACLU anymore,
Well,
you're
that doesn't mean
still-
I've lost
you're-
my belief in
no,
civil
no,
liberties.
I know. What I'm saying is, are you going to continue to work with this issue, or are you putting it in the hands of the others that are
Well,
still at the ACLU?
I'm still a member of the ACLU, so I'm still invested in through that mechanism. But I'm not the executive director anymore, so I don't call any shots, or I'm free to make statements that are a little less tactful than Dr. Brown here. The ACLU is a strange organization. I know the public image of it is one of some kind of leftist liberal group, but civil liberties are really a core and very conservative value. Civil liberties value individuals over the collective good of society. You know, we don't believe in allowing the convenience of government to be an excuse for abridging the rights of an individual. And that's a very conservative way of looking at the world. And in fact, some of our membership growth has been with conservative people in the last few years. So although the public image is one of this rampant liberal organization, the fact of the matter is that civil liberties are a very conservative idea, a very restraining principle, trying to hold government accountable, trying to hold government in check, trying to make sure that people have the right to be who they want to be. If they want to be the odd guy who sits in the park and throws popcorn at the pigeons, they should have the right to be able to sit in the park and throw their popcorn. If they want to stand on a street corner and scream about abortion or war or any other issue of the day, they should have the right to have their voice heard without the government restraining them.
Joseph, let's talk to you a little bit about some of the reasons that you became involved, because you're a board member. So talk a little bit about the board, how individuals in the community who might be listening can say, hey, that sounds like something that I would want to get involved in, how they could do so.
Well, the easy, I mean, there's a whole list of ways that you can be involved in the ACLU, and I would urge people that the easiest and most straightforward entry place is join the organization, go to the website, and write. I mean, there is both legal and political process involved here, and persuading legislators that in fact the Constitution is a good idea is one of the best things that people can do for the Constitution. And so the entry spot is to go to either the ACLU Nebraska website or the national website and see what sorts of issues are at stake. And the ones you feel strongly about, write somebody who's in charge and say, look, this is important to me and my vote hinges on you being supportive of this. So that's the entry spot. Other ways to be involved include working as interns and volunteer work in the office, which certainly law students do a great deal, but people who are not law students also do that work occasionally. And then as a board member, I mean, if you really want to be a board member, call.
You're looking for some.
It is a fairly time-consuming sort of thing, and so we generally have a dearth of people who are really committed to spending the time that it takes to be a good board member, and so we're always looking for good candidates.
So explain what your role is then.
Well, as any board of a nonprofit, I mean, our primary job is forming policy, and so that's the sort of core issue for any board member. In this case, it means not only sort of general policy of the organization, but also deciding which cases we're going to pursue and which cases we are not going to pursue. We get advice from our lawyers panel on that, but that's fundamentally a board decision. Of course, fundraising is part of any nonprofit board. And then, depending on the particular individual and their time availability, all sorts of other contributions are made. Everything from statisticians who are doing interesting work looking at the sex offender registry and how predictive it is that you've committed crime X that you're going to commit again, which is basic stat work. There's we go out occasionally at protests as observers just to see what the police do in response to a protest. We wear our little yellow vests and look like crossing guards for the First Amendment. There's all sorts of work, and it all depends on the time someone has. I mean, the minimum commitment is going to board meetings every other month, which is about a 5 or 6 hour meeting every other month. But
let's talk a little bit about age, political parties. Does that run the gamut? Some might say, oh, it's only the Green Party that gets involved with the ACLU. But I know that's not true. So
well, it's not true. It is obviously the case that there tends to be a higher number of professors and lawyers supporting the ACLU than other professions, and so I mean, it's just statistically true. But you know, if you go far enough right, you end up with us too. I mean, you end up with Goldwater Republicans are civil libertarians as well. And so we do have some members of the board who are sort of cranky old, crotchety libertarians. And so the political, has a fairly broad spectrum. Racially, it's a cross-section of Nebraska. It's age-wise, everything from new lawyers just right out of law school. We've had actually graduate students, so people still in school. One of our recent board presidents was a graduate student here.
Okay.
And then on up to some real crotchety old coots. So yeah, I mean, there is no bar to being a board member based on any of those factors.
Okay. Well, Tim, I want to talk about a couple more cases that were under your leadership. Well, one was the ACLU supported an Omaha couple who objected to testing of their newborn child on the basis of religious beliefs. So talk a little bit about that.
These people were Scientologists, and as Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes' recent birth brought into the news, Scientologists have a religious belief in how birthing should be done. And they want it as quiet and non-disruptive as possible. It's part of their beliefs about the soul entering the body or something. The state of Nebraska requires that every child, every newborn, be tested for PKU, which is a rare genetic disorder. And our clients came to us because they did not want their child tested for PKU until after a 72-hour period had passed to comply with their religious beliefs. We won a restraining order from the Federal District Court prohibiting the testing, and there was legislation introduced to allow this religious exemption to be put into law. Unfortunately, the legislature got wrapped up in other things this year, and the bill didn't progress. But again, Scientologists are not in the mainstream of American society. But our clients had a heartfelt belief that the soul of their child had to be protected through the process of this quiet birth, and by not poking it with a needle when it was in the delivery room and drawing. I mean, they only draw a couple drops of blood, but it requires poking with a needle, which generally results in the child crying, of course. We had to convince a judge, and judges are somewhat skeptical, like the rest of society is, when it comes to things such as this. We had to convince a judge that there was a religious issue here, and when the judge appreciated that that existed, we got the order that we needed to allow the birth to proceed.
Okay. Another case, well, you want to continue a little bit?
It's kind of typical that we do a lot of religious free exercise cases. And for all the publicity that we get about Platt-Smith, where we're looking at church-state from the viewpoint of whether the government is endorsing religion, there's another part of the First Amendment that says the government can't restrain the free exercise of religion. And we've gone to court to protect the free exercise of religion. Probably in the 6 years that I was there, we had the Platt-Smith case and a school prayer case up in Norfolk, where we were fighting for the principle of no government endorsement of religious practices. But on the same hand, we had twice as many cases where we protected the free exercise of religion. And we did that on behalf of a Presbyterian congregation in Lincoln that was ordered to move out of its building because it wasn't zoned for churches. We were able to prevail in that case and keep the church operating in a site that they wanted to be in. We represented a North Omaha church in a case involving liquor licenses and how the government defined a church for the purpose of how the Liquor Control Commission defined a church. We felt that they were being too restrictive. We represented a Muslim woman who was denied entry into an Omaha swimming pool because she wanted to wear she was wearing clothing and not a bathing suit. So it's not just this idea of the government endorsing religion that's important to the ACLU, but we also believe that the free exercise of religion is equally important, and we stand up for that principle just as aggressively as we stand up for the principle of no government endorsement.
Well, we have about 3 minutes left, and I really want to get to, there are so many cases that come onto your table, so whether the ACLU could decide to pursue them or not. How do you make the decision? What is a case that the ACLU is going to work with, and what is a case that you will not?
We get about 800 calls and letters a year for help, which is a tremendous drain on an office that only has 2.5 full-time staff people. But those are screened, and the ones that have no civil liberties issues, obviously we try and refer them out to a different agency or different source of assistance. Cases that present a true civil liberties issue where the government is violating a right that's secured by the Constitution are vetted by the staff, maybe some investigation done by one of our interns to flesh out the facts a little bit, and then it goes to a panel of attorneys. We have about a half dozen attorneys in Omaha and another half dozen in Lincoln, and they alternate meeting on a monthly basis. And those attorneys review the information and make a recommendation to the board of directors on whether or not it's a case that the ACLU should take. It's then the board's responsibility to determine whether we have the resources to take the case. Do we have the money that it takes to fight that kind of a battle? And unfortunately, we've had to turn down some cases because we didn't have resources. The ACLU's budget is not infinite. It has the same restraints on it as any other nonprofit organization this day and age, which is too much work and not enough money.
So what happens with some of those cases? Can they pursue other
Oh, they
areas?
can pursue other sources of help, and we try to
Point
make
them
that
in that
happen.
direction.
But you know, when someone is represented by the ACLU, there's no cost to them. The ACLU pays for the attorneys' time and energy, pays all the court filing fees. Our clients never pay us a penny. If we have to refer them out to a private attorney for help with the case, obviously they have to negotiate with that attorney over things like fees and costs.
So we have about 1 minute left. Joseph, what would you say to people who are listening who are thinking this is something that I would be interested in or would like to hear more information? What would you say to them about getting involved?
Well, first I'd say good for them.
Yeah.
The next thing is that it's very easy. The ACLU Nebraska is found in the phone book, Lincoln phone book. It's found on the web. We have a staff who would be delighted to get them involved at any level that they feel comfortable, whether that's as sending us sending letters, whether that's actually doing work for us, whether that's being a board member. There is some place for everybody that's interested in civil liberties in the ACLU.
Okay. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being here, and
My pleasure.
enjoy not having to be called by the media all the time for interviews either.
It's nice.
Enjoy your weekends as well.
As I disappear into the woodwork.
All right. Well, thanks, Tim and Joseph Brown, for joining us this week on Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 9th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.